It's time to be kind with Marley Q.
Because the time to be kind to ourselves, each other, and the world is now. 1, 2, 3. Hi, Parker. I'm Marley Q, and welcome to episode 12 with David Sylvester, better known around the world as Big Dave. This man is awesome. You may think I'm exaggerating, but this Parker from Philadelphia has personally hugged and high-fived over 500,000 people, from newborns to 100-year-olds in 50 states and 42 countries since the 9/11 tragedy in 2001. Now, this interview was recorded before the tragic deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. And even though I recognize right now may not seem like the right time to be promoting hugs, the time to be kind to all mankind is now. I'm offering this episode as a humble way of collectively wrapping our arms around the world to embrace all Black lives who not only matter, but deserve to be seen, heard, understood, valued, respected, and have the light shine on them in positive ways. So today, let's let the light shine brightly on Big Dave's story and learn how he was able to turn a tragedy into inspiration to be the spark and hug the world. If you could just give us a brief overview of how this all got started. How did you turn this tragedy that we all experienced into inspiration?
It was after I lost my friend, I wanted to do something. I think if anybody that was alive then or really remembers that time, is that I think we all felt powerless. I think we all felt like we were, potential victims just being an American, just for being in a big city. We all just felt like, something as innocent as a plane that just transports people could be turned against us. And I mean, it was something that I didn't like that feeling. And, and that coupled with the fact that I just lost my friend, I wanted to do something. And what I found is that, when I bicycled across the United States to honor my friend, is that almost everybody I met, regardless of what they wanted to express, whether it was patriotism, camaraderie, whether it was consoling me, they all expressed it with a hug. And it was something that, I really didn't think of at the time, but I was just out there just honoring my friend by biking across the United States. And, what I found is that, like I said, after it was all over, the one thing that was common in almost everything and everyone that I met was that they just wanted a hug. So I really thought about that. And I wanted to continue this sort of this very unique view of humanity that I had. So I next rode my bicycle across Africa from Cairo to Cape Town. And it was the same thing, even though we're a few years removed from September 11th, even though, I was in a different continent, different countries. I mean, people still wanted to connect via a hug. And so I continued on by biking Asia, North America again, Australia, and everywhere I went, once I really opened up myself and told my story, people just wanted to connect and just wanted a hug. And it wasn't even something that I was overtly asking for. It was just there. And so one thing kind of, like I said, has just sort of led one thing to another. And the first overt hug and high five tour was in Australia in 2014, when I just not only biked from Sydney to Melbourne, I also challenged myself to hug and high five 1,000 people in a month. No signs, no preamble, just going up to people and, sharing my story and say, hey, you want a hug? And then taking a picture of it. And when I was able to do that in 22 days, 1,000 people in 22 days, it was, it really got me thinking about really going after it and just trying to hug and high five as many people as I could. So, and that's kind of just a brief overview of how it all started. I just wanted to do something to honor a friend. And just, I think like anything, when you do something new, you stop and you take stock of what happened. And, it's been interesting because that is the one thing that sort of everybody wants, and especially as we've gotten more and more, polarized in terms of politically or gender or this or whatever. I mean, the one thing that really cuts through all that is just hugs and high fives. And so it's just, so it's been good.
Nothing beats the human touch.
Right.
right? Have you ever had an experience where your hug or your high five wasn't welcome?
It's all the time. I mean, it's all, I mean, listen, it's not that deep to me. And so I get it. And if you don't want it, you don't want it. And that's fine.
Keep going.
Yeah, just keep it moving, man.
And keep it going, because the large majority of people really need almost that persistence of kindness. So they may not, if they see you that first time around, they don't really trust or, see it as a gimmick, like you said, or always just trying to get attention, right? Some people may see it that way.
Some people do.
But you see it as persistence and you see a consistent behavior. I think the kindness shines through and people see that you're really just trying to give and be available to people.
Well, I will say that one of the nicest texts that I ever got was from a guy that apologized for not hugging me. I had an event in Virginia Beach, and he wrote to me that he was in a coffee shop where I was and thought that I was selling something and thought that this was some sort of, cheesy event. And he said, but, he never saw any money exchanged. And he said that everybody that walked away from me, he said, it was interesting that whatever I was selling, everyone was hugging me after they purchased it. And so he just said that, he looked into me and into my story after he left. And he said, I really shouldn't have just judged you. And, I apologize. I owe you a hug the next time I see you. And so it's, sometimes people have their own misconceptions about what things are, about who people are and stuff like that. And that's cool. It's, I get it. I mean, I think we all do it from time to time. And, I applaud this guy for just being, man enough to admit, hey, listen, man, I was wrong. I was incorrect in my assumption.
I think that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure that in your travels and where you've been all over the world, you've encountered some of that. And that's why I brought it up. I mean, you're an African-American man. And I'm sure in places that you've seen or that you've visited, you've been the first Black man that people have ever seen. And you're coming up and hugging them, right? So that experience must be unique.
That is definitely true. There's a lot of places where, especially throughout Asia. Well, I mean, let's be real. I mean, there are a lot of places in Africa where they hadn't met an African American before. So it's been interesting to hold the flag, so to speak, for Black Americans around the world. But I mean, that's why I go in hugging and high fiving. I go in smiling. I go in clear because I want to make it easier for the next person. I want the next brother that comes behind me to have, an even easier time than I have, going places and stuff like that.
I think that's awesome and an incredible, powerful way to park. Let me ask you, Big Dave, have you ever felt kind of like burnt out or drained from hugging so many people or hearing so many stories that are, kind of emotionally charged? And if you have, how do you recharge yourself? How do you park for yourself?
You know what? I'm burnt out now. This interview's over.
Oh no! Come back! Virtual hug.
I am. There are times. I mean, one of the things that really got me one time, I was at a hospital. I was in a dementia wing, and I talked to this woman who she said, "I know I'm not in my right mind, but I'm good now, and I think what you're doing is simply beautiful." And she gave me a big hug, and I went back around to see her about 45 minutes later, and she had no idea who I was. And that really broke my heart. I mean, it really got to me to the point. I mean, I needed a long moment to get myself together. So, I told the people who were organizing the event I was supposed to go somewhere else. I was like, look, we have to cancel this next thing, and then I'll go to the thing after that. But I need to go somewhere and cry for a bit. And so sometimes it's hard to process some stuff. But, because of that, I'm very cognizant. I'm very aware of my feelings and my time. And I just get out. I get out when I have to.
I think that's so important to share. Thank you for doing so. So with all of the incredibly memorable and meaningful acts of kindness that I'm sure you have received throughout the world. Is there anyone in particular that stands out that really impacted you?
Listen, if you were to ask me this question 10 times, I'd give you 10 different memories.
I bet.
So I am going to talk about something that happened on the very first ride. And we were in Wisconsin, and my friend and I were bicycling across the country. And we saw this woman. She's jogging, and we're talking to her. And it was in the middle of nowhere. And we just had a nice conversation as she's jogging, as we're cycling along. And in the middle of the conversation, she just took off, and she, cut through some farmland. And it was weird because we were having a nice conversation, but there was no goodbye. There was no, I don't want to talk. There was no nothing. It was just no egress. It was just, she was just out. And so I was like, that was just really weird. So my friend and I kept cycling for a while, and we biked a little ways up the road. We made a right, and we're biking. And then all of a sudden, as we are biking down the road, we see two little kids standing on the side of the road with a sign. And as we get closer, little kids, you can see they're just jumping up and down. We can also see some balloons, and they're jumping up and down, and they're waving us on. And we figured that maybe some other cyclists had biked past them before, and so they thought it was a bike race or something like that. So we were prepared to ride right by them. And then all of a sudden, right when we got up on the kids yelled, "Stop, stop, 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 stop." And we stopped, and the kids were so excited, and we were like, "We heard you were coming. Like, what are you talking about?" And it was just weird talking to two little kids on the side of the road. And it was, I told my boy Scott, I was like, "Yo, man, this is strange, man. It's time to go, man." And he said, "Yeah, man, it's time to go." So we're like, "Bye, kids." And all of a sudden the kids said, "You can't leave. The cookies aren't done yet." And we were like, "What are you talking about?" And then all of a sudden the woman that we had just talked to, who, apparently what she had done had darted through farmland to get to the back of her house to tell her family, "Hey, look, there's some cool cyclists that are coming by." And she threw some cookies in the oven, and excuse me, the balloons were left over from her mother's birthday party the day before. She, the kids made a sign that said "Go Bikers." And all of a sudden, like, all of this happened just in a relatively short amount of time. And she said, "I knew you were going to be coming right past our house." And so we ended up staying, sitting on the porch with this woman that we had met and her family and these two little kids. I mean, just for probably about 45 minutes, and that was just the random act of kindness, just a random, just random. And it was just something that really let me know that, there really are some very, very, very good people out there. And a lot of times you just give people the chance, give people the opportunity. Good things will happen.
Oh,
and
I love that.
I think that, I think in general, I mean, it's all about the energy that you put out. Mm-hmm. It's all about what you engender. I mean, if you are constantly looking for the bad side of people, there's, look, if you want trouble, it's out there. It's out there, in droves. But at this, conversely, if you want goodness, it's out there as well. You just have to want it. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And it's not going to be easy, just like anything, but if you want it, it is out there. And I think that's the important thing to tell people. I mean, it's just with my story, I have hugged 500,000 people. That means I have easily encountered 1.5 million people in 19 years. If I want to really look at it from a really crappy lens, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to be constantly focused on the people that didn't hug me. Mm. But how I choose to look at it is the people that did hug me. How I choose to look at it is the people where I did have good connections. How I choose to look at it is, all of the smiles that I've seen. I've now seen, 500,000 smiles in every color, shape, accent, that imaginable. And that's how I choose to look at it. And I think it's I would say that anybody that's listening to this, if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously believe that there's good things out there. You believe that there's good people out there. And that's it. Let that be, the bedrock of your day, that there are good people out there. And that's it. And so it's, and believe. And believe. I think it's important that for anybody that is, on a mission, whatever that mission is to really, remember why you're in this. I'm in this for good, for good reasons. I'm in there for happy reasons. So like I said, if you ask me this question again in an hour, I'll give you a completely different answer that is just as vivid to me. Because that's why I got into this. And so I think there are tough times. It ain't free. It's comes at a cost. It comes at a cost in terms of time, money, and everything. And it's a lot. But when I do think about the mounting costs and stuff like that, I have to remember that woman in Wisconsin. I have to remember the smile on those kids' faces. I have to remember
the why.
All the good times. And I've had so many good times. And I've had so many beautiful moments. And that's what I have to remember in order to continue on. And that's what I focus on all the time, is the good times.
Oh, Dave, you are my definition of a superhero. This podcast is really about shining the light on, the everyday, regular, if you will, person that has this superpower of kindness within them, right? So you found your bike, you found your why, you turned, a tragic moment into inspiration to go out and pedal the world for 19 years. And we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And, for those listening out there that might think like, wow, I can't do, what Big Dave is doing. I just want this conversation to remind everyone listening is, and I think you say it, I'm quoting you, is find your own bike. What is it for you?
Yeah, find your own thing. You can do it. Listen, it's great to hear somebody that's 19 years into a story and then, but then, sometimes people think, oh my God, I can't do that. It hasn't always been 19 years. I remember when it was 5 years in, and it was 10 years in, it was 2 years in. And like I said, it hasn't been easy, but that's why I focused in on the good times. I focused in on all those smiles. That's why I've stayed in contact with a lot of those people. And with social media now, it's a lot easier to stay in contact with those people and sort of build your own coalition, to build your own platform. But stay at it. And it doesn't, and listen, if you listen to my story, it wasn't always hugs and high fives. It was, it sort of grew into that. So don't think that, whatever your theme of goodness is today, that it has to stay that way. It has to stay good, but it doesn't always have to stay that way. And then when you are true to yourself, no one can take you asunder. No one can take you down, and then you have the freedom to change direction and grow in the way that you want to grow. And so I would just say, for anybody that is listening to this podcast, if you find yourself down, if you find yourself doubting, if you find yourself, wondering, can you still stay in the game? Call me and let's talk about it. My number is 267-252-1974. I only got one friggin' phone, and that's it. And so just call me. You want to talk about it? I'll listen. I will listen. There was one time when this is early on. This is probably like the fourth or fifth year, when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. I can't afford it. I can't, I'm paying for these trips out of my own pocket. I can't do it. And so one of my coworkers and good friends was sitting with me while I was in the gym, and I had the wand heads out, and she was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I can't do this, man. I'm done. I gotta find a real job that pays more, this, that, and the other, or whatever." And I said, I'm done. And my friend got angry at me and snatched the wine ads out of my hand. And I was like, what's your problem? And she was like, Dave, she said, you have no idea how many of us lived through you. How many of us, are always, when you leave the room, we talk about the cool things that you do in the world, the cool things that you say, the cool things that happen. And she said, you make us all stronger. And she said, if you can't hack it, then what about the rest of us? And so she's like, you have to hang in this for the rest of us. And she started opening up about times that she wanted to quit, but I was doing my own thing. And she said, and was like, you know what? I'm going to hang in there for a little bit longer. So she was like, Dave, please, just hang in there for another week. I'm sure something will come. So that was Sunday. Tuesday, I got a call from a teacher that said she wanted me to speak to her students. And she said that she couldn't pay me, but she did read that I had joked one time that I will work for food. And she said that if you will let me buy you lunch that day, anywhere you want, I would love to have you speak to my students. And so I was like, wow, all right, this is paying off. I mean, it's not paying off in the way that I want, but it is paying off in food. And so I had a nice lunch that day, but it was, it wasn't the lunch. It was the fact that something did happen. And how I chose to look at it was like, you know what, somebody is listening to me out there. And I hung in there for another week. And then a few weeks later, something else broke for me. So for the people that are out there that are at that point where they're picking up those one hats, either literally or metaphorically, just call me. Just call me. I understand what it's like, to struggle. I understand what it's like to want to quit a million friggin' times over. I understand this, but if you find yourself down and doubting, really, if you find yourself ready to get out, just call me. Like I said, 267-252-1974. I'm the Human High Five on Instagram. I'm very easy to spot, and let's talk about it. And more importantly, let's talking about it. Let's keep you in the game. Let's keep you in the game of life. Let's keep you in the game of happiness.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I got emotional while you were sharing because I've been, quote unquote, in this kindness spreading game myself since I was 10 years old and as a quote unquote business for about 10 years now. And, on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, is when we produced our first big 5K event, our first big fundraising event that with no sponsors, no big email list. I mean, it was totally out of my pocket, my husband's or my boyfriend at the time, who wasn't even my husband yet. He married me, luckily, even after everything I put him through. And we did this event for 5 years, all on passion, all on drive, all about the mission. And man, did I burn out and I hit quote unquote bottom of, I can't do this anymore. Right. I can't afford this. I cannot keep this engine moving and try and run a business and make, my bills. And it was just one of those really low times, which I wish I had your phone number because I would have really needed a talk and a virtual hug. And it really is about the people that you surround yourself with that's so powerful, that keep me in the game, keep me focused on the mission, keep me focused on the why we do this. And really starting this podcast was a big journey for me. And it's another way of creating an event, an online virtual event, and to keep this movement going, finding a different way, right? That's not so cost burdensome, like a huge scale event, right? Find a different way to continue moving the mission and the movement forward, because the truth is the world needs kindness now more than ever. The world needs a hug now more than ever. And I know you agree with that.
Yes.
100,000%. For those listening, I want them to follow your journey, to continue following your journey and supporting Big Dave Hugs the World in 80 days. I know that you're working on this now and for, gearing up for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. How can people connect with you virtually, online, and support Big Dave Hugs the World?
Support, I'll just say this, support comes in a lot of different ways. Support can come obviously in the form of $1. But support can be in the form of a like. It can be in the form of a suggestion. It can be in the form of an encouraging word. So I would just say whatever it is that you want to support, whether it be me, you, whatever, an artist, any kind of artist, just support them. Support them in any way that you can. Whatever you like, support it to keep it going, because the person that's running that, may be a woman that, like you, that, is just doing this on pure passion and stuff like that. And she needs to know, hey, listen, does anybody out there care? And it's just right. And somebody like me, who's just like, I'm just out there trying to hug people and stuff like that, and it's just, I need to know, does anybody out there care? I go to business meetings a lot of times and people are like, this is silly. This is silly. We're not going to fund you. We're not going to sponsor you. All right, that's okay. That's a business decision. I get that. But then all of a sudden, and I could focus on that, but what I do focus on is all of the emails and the texts and stuff that I get from people around the planet, who love what I'm doing. When I went to Times Square on Black Friday to go hug people for the holidays, in one 10-minute span, I got texts from people in Alaska, London, and Israel who said, I'm so happy for what you're doing. I'm so happy, and that's it. And that's enough. That support, made me warm on that cool day. That support made me smile a little bit more. That support is what I needed. So, for people out there, support your artists.
Oh, I love it. We can talk forever, Big Dave. I know you got a busy day, maybe a plane to catch soon. Thank you so much for making the time to be kind today and joining us on this podcast and just sharing your light, your love, your smiles, your hugs virtually with all of us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I told you Big Dave was awesome. He's got so many uplifting stories to share, so we'll definitely invite him back to hear all about his adventures hugging the world. This episode was sponsored by Chris Colina Realtor, one of our founding partners who immediately enlisted to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces shortly after 9/11, and now serves as a one-of-a-kind realtor helping people buy or sell their home. Visit marleyq.com/12 for all the links you need to connect with Big Dave, Chris Colina Realtor, and to find out how you can become one of our partners too. That's marleyq.com/12. Thank you for listening. If you're inspired to make a little more time to be kind, please subscribe, leave a kind review, and share with a friend who would appreciate this podcast too. Thank you for being the spark of kindness. See you next time.